Begonias, ornamental turtle. Yeah, that I have watched that multiple times, and I probably will watch it a few more times. It has been funny every time I've watched that video. It's actually from a few years back. Another church produced that video, and I found it this week and thought, oh, yeah, we're going to show you. And staff were like, I don't know. And I was like, no, we're showing it. It's funny. It's good. So anyway, so there you go. A little something for us dads today. Happy Father's Day to all of us. And on this day, and so yeah, it was a bunch of staff dads who decided we should have Conecuh sausage on Father's Day. Nothing wrong with that. Come on now. And so we offer that up to all the dads. And, other people can have Conecuh sausage. It's fine if you get some. If you're not a dad, it's okay. But it's just for dads. So anyway, so there's that. I've always known the origins of Mother's Day and all that, but I've never really looked at the origins of Father's Day. So I went in, Wikipedia, of course, and found out that here's a little bit of history for you, that the first observance of Father's Day was held on July 5th, 1908 in Fairmount, West Virginia, at what was then Williams Memorial Methodist Episcopal Church South. That's the whole name of the church. Holy cow. It's now Central United Methodist Church. But the reason they had it was actually for kind of a tragic reason. A lady named Grace Clayton was mourning the loss of her father in what is now a historical catastrophe that happened in the Monongah mining disaster. Killed 361 men, 250 of those were fathers, left almost 1,000 children fatherless. It was really something. And so on that Sunday following that, this lady and several people went to the pastor, Robert Webb, and asked, can we honor those fathers that were lost and then really just honor all fathers on this day? So they did, and that kind of became something that other churches decided to make an observance, and so several churches picked it up along the way, but it wasn't until 1966 that President Johnson actually declared a proclamation, first presidential proclamation, honoring dads and designating the third Sunday in June as Father's Day. 6 years later, Richard Nixon then signed that into law in 1972. And here we are. So now we have Father's Day. And so as we're thinking about just briefly a little bit about Father's Day, I'm hoping that dads, you will spend the day to, relax, open your card or gift or whatever that is that you get, but also maybe spend some time just in reflection on, what does it mean to be a father, especially in this day and age. And Becky and I went down to Montgomery yesterday and spent some time with our dads. And, her dad's in his mid-80s, my dad's in his mid-70s, and, body's wearing out a little bit. But let me tell you, they're still just as strong in terms of continuing to try to pass on things, continuing to leave a legacy. Hey, trying to teach us those good principles. And especially with our boys, they're like, hey, tell the boys this, be sure and tell the boys that. It's this sort of constant teaching that's going on there, this passing along that good wisdom that they've gained over the years, and they're not forgetting that that's a part of who they are at that time. And so I'm reflecting on that, driving back here to Auburn, and just thinking about, I hope that when I'm that age, that I'm still as passionate about passing along that good wisdom and really trying to influence my kids, their grandkids, or their kids, and so on, and offering that sense of what does it mean to be a man of integrity? What does it mean to be, somebody of character, a follower of Christ in this day and age? So anyway, so I'm thinking about that just for us today, that we would also reflect on our very important role as fathers in this day and age. It's dicey raising kids in this world today. I don't have to tell you that, but I think that dads, we have this really great opportunity to raise up kids who are, have great strength of character, who are people of integrity, and who mostly love the Lord. And a lot of that will come from the father. And that's not saying anything against moms. I'm just saying the statistics prove that if the father goes in this direction, children will follow. It's a high percentage. And so we want to be men of courage. We want to be dads who are really making an impact on those who are around us in our family. So I just offer that to you today as we celebrate Father's Day and make it such a great day. So also today we want to go ahead and continue this series that we started a couple of weeks ago called Rhythm. And if you're new this morning, if you're a guest, let me just kind of catch you up on where we are. We decided it'd be a good idea this summer to have a series where we looked at two important things in all of our lives, the idea of rest and the idea of work. And that biblically, that we are created to hold those two things equally in our life and have this kind of rhythm of back and forth of how we do those two things. So we decided to use a metronome as sort of something that's symbolic of what that means. A metronome is something that thing ticks back and forth in an even motion, and we use it musically to help us learn timing and rhythm. as we're learning a musical instrument or whatever. And in the same way, we have to learn that sense of timing and rhythm when it comes to how much do we work and how much do we rest, and that we do each of those well in our life so that we can have a fulfilled life. And the Bible talks a lot about that. So we're spending this summer kind of going back and forth talking about each of those things. In week 1, I talked a little bit about rest, that we are people who are kind of 3 major components: body, mind, and spirit, and that all of those things need rest throughout our life in a proper way. Last week, Lee Cadden preached a little bit on work. And, kind of reminded us that work is, first of all, not necessarily bad, although sometimes we might think our job is not good, but work itself, God designed us to work. That's not a result of the fall, that we actually worked back in the garden. Adam and Eve worked the garden. God gave them responsibilities even before the fall to do what they were doing back then. So we know that we were created for work, and that work is a part of who we are, part of the original design. So today we're going to swing back over to rest and talk a little bit more about that biblical concept. Let me ask you something. In the Bible, what is the term that's used for rest? Does anybody know? Sabbath. That's right. The biblical idea of rest comes from that word Sabbath, which is a very old concept. So, in fact, we see it. I mentioned this in the first week. It's in God's top 10, right? Top 10 things I command you to do. This shows up as number 4 on that list, and you find it in Exodus 20. Verses 8 through 11. And let me just read that and we'll talk about it. It says, "Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male nor female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but he rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy." So God is spending a lot of time in this commandment. You notice, if you look at this one compared to the other 9 commandments that are there, this is the longest and most descriptive, which is interesting to me. Something like rest would get this much attention, but it's so important that God wanted to be very clear about what this would look like for all of us, even designating a day that it should happen. By the way, the word Sabbath comes from the Hebrew origin, which is Sabbat, which means to rest or stop or cease from work, to just stop all work and to do nothing but rest. In the book Building a Discipling Culture, I thought it was interesting what the author Mike Breen said about this particular commandment. He said, "The commandment to keep the Sabbath is right up there with don't kill, don't steal, and don't commit adultery. In other words, being a workaholic is to God just as bad as being a murderer or an adulterer. Rest is not an option if we are to walk in the lifestyle of a disciple." Man, that's just stark to me. When he puts it in those words, rest, is vital. And if we don't do it well, it's just as bad as some really bad things that we would consider in this life. Because there's something about us that God created that needs to be good. We need to be good in that sense of healthy. We need to be good in that sense of resting all of who we are. In the New Testament, we see rest again just as vital. We remember the word testament, by the way, means covenant. So when Jesus came, died on that cross, sacrifice was always part of making a covenant in the Old Testament. Jesus became a way for a new covenant to happen. We established a new relationship with God. While the law was, Jesus didn't come to do away with the law. He came to fulfill it, but he came to bring it into a new way. Now it's not just about what's externally imposed on us, but it's about how we believe internally in our heart. That's this new covenant. It's more of a relationship that we share with God. And so Jesus came to talk about now how we're going to relate to God. Less focus on that external imposing the law on us, more about our heart connecting with God. So in terms of Sabbath, in Mark 2:27, we're actually going to talk about this verse a little bit more later in the series, but he says this, "Then he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord, even of the Sabbath." And, essentially what he was saying is, listen, Pharisees and everybody else, in some ways we've sort of gotten this backward over the years. You'd have thought that God made the Sabbath, created that. Then he created us and said, serve the Sabbath. There's only one way that you can do the Sabbath. But that's not the way it was meant to be, Jesus said. First God created man and said, and oh, by the way, here's the Sabbath. This is for you. It serves your purpose, your rest, your need to make something holy in your life, to connect with God and sort of to power down. So kind of a new day. And Jesus came in and instituted that. But the commandment's still in force. You must rest. You must rest. Now, for some of us, it's like, oh, I'm all for that. Let's rest, But doing it well, resting is one thing, but doing that well is a whole other thing. And so this morning, we're going to talk about what that means, just to kind of do that well and talk about some, what I'll just call Sabbath truths for today. So I'm just going to ask several questions. First of all, when do I Sabbath? When should that happen? Is it still this one day, this one specific day? When I was growing up, back in my day, I think is how you say that when you're 50 now. Anyway, back when I was growing up, there was very little that happened on a Sunday. How about you? Do you remember a day when many stores were not open? You remember a day when most people didn't cut their grass? And my grandparents especially, back when they were growing up, it was like, oh yeah, Sunday was completely off limits. We went to church, we went home, and we rested. That's what we did. How are we doing today? Man, we're 24/7, aren't we? We have become a culture of work, keep things open, and now stores are open. Chick-fil-A's not open. Anyway, that's one of those. Some people have literally said no to that whole thing about Sunday and said, we're just not going to be open. We believe in it that much. We're going to lock it down and not make people work on Sunday. So, there's this sense of something has changed here on the Sabbath. It's been kind of hard as a dad, too, especially with Will, our youngest, playing lacrosse. They played a lot of games on Sunday this year, 10 o'clock Sunday morning. And I'm like, how does the preacher dad come to a game at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning? And so missed a few games there, and so it's kind of hard. And I know that we have lots of people who have kids, some of you with travel ball and takes you away. And gosh, I have people who, they'll catch me in like late November, after the season is over in the fall or something, and they haven't been here all fall because literally they've been traveling. They're like, oh, I'm so sorry. I feel so guilty. We haven't been here on Sunday. I'm like, golly, just calm down. It's okay. It's fine. I have checked you off as absent every Sunday, but it's fine. It's no big deal. I've noticed that you've been gone, but don't worry about that. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm like, listen, I get it. It's the world that we live in now, and it's either, look, tell your child, I'm sorry, you cannot play this because of Sundays, and then they'll be bitter and resent you for the rest of their life, or you could do something else. And this is what I would encourage. Look, if you have a kid who's doing travel ball or whatever, and it takes you away on Sunday, Sunday morning is not the only time you can worship. Everybody got that? It doesn't have to happen on an hour at this particular location, in this particular time, singing a few songs and hearing a message and then praying and going and having Kaneka sausage. Although that is a good part of what could be worship. But anyway, take Sunday with you wherever you go. If you're at the ball field, what would be great? Why don't you call a few parents ahead of time and say, hey, we're all going to be there together. Can we spend 15 minutes before the game starts? I'll read a scripture. We'll talk about it for just a minute, share some thoughts about how we can encourage our kids today, be good examples for parents, and then we're going to pray and go. How about that? You just took church to wherever you are. Well, that's a win. So anyway, just a little side note there for you. That's my advice about stuff like that. Obviously, we want you here. We want to gather as the body. That's still a vital and important part of what it is to be the body of Christ. But, it happens in so many ways. But the Sabbath, originally was just kind of this first day of the week, and it goes all the way back to that New Testament when Christians gathered on the first day of the week. Acts 20, verse 7, it says, on the first day of the week, we came together to break bread. Paul spoke to the people, and because he intended to leave the next day, he kept on talking till midnight. It's tough in those early days, man. You got it made. Paul preaching on until midnight. In fact, you should read the rest of that particular story, because eventually there was a guy who was sitting in a window. He fell asleep. He fell out the window and died while Paul was preaching. And then Paul had to go raise him from the dead. There's a good ending to that story. So he raised him from the dead, so it's all good. But anyway, so first day of the week they gather. 1 Corinthians 16:2 says, on the first day of every week, each one of you should set aside a sum of money in keeping with your income, saving it up so that when I come, no collections will have to be made. Again, this was because that was the day that they would come together, worship, take up the offering and the collections. And also, of course, those folks that went to find Jesus at the tomb, first day of the week. In fact, every Sunday we're still celebrating the resurrection of Jesus. Every Sunday is a mini Easter because we're celebrating that on this first day, and so we gather and we do that here. I don't know about you, but trying to find Sabbath sometimes can be difficult because for me, see, it doesn't always happen here on Sunday morning because I'm working. So I find Sabbath at another time of the day or of the week. I generally Sabbath on Friday. That's my day off, and I do my best to protect that day and to rest and to power down. So that's my Sabbath. That's when I sort of make that happen. But oftentimes I have to put it on the calendar to rest because I'm real quick, maybe like you, to put all my work stuff on the calendar first. All these important things go on the calendar first because, that has to happen. Rest just sort of happens somewhere in the middle of all that. But I think if God could stand here and sort of encourage us, he would say, can I ask you to make rest as much of a priority? And when you look at your week, could you build in rest into that week too? Could you find a way to make rest a vital part of your life by making it a priority? Hard to do. I'm not saying that's easy. Maybe we all have some crazy jobs that are it's tough, but I still think it's in force that we need to learn to rest well and to make it a rhythm and schedule that time in. And really, it's not necessarily about a particular day of finding Sabbath. Maybe you find it here on Sunday, and that's your good day. But I think it's just as much important to find a rhythm of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, every week, every month, so that all throughout our life, we're finding ways to power down, to genuinely give our heart to Jesus, to let him work on us, okay? Another thought here is just, how do I Sabbath? When I'm taking that time, what is important as I do that well? And, I think, first of all, kind of back to that understanding of who we are as people, how God created us, that we're more than just one-dimensional beings, that we're people who are created as that, we're a body, we're a mind, we're a soul, we're a heart. There's so many things that go into us. And this past week at WindShape, they had a theme. It was all. And it was just talking about sort of giving our all to God. And can I just say one more time, WindShape was phenomenal. I mean, I don't know that we could overemphasize that because of what happens in the lives of these children during this week is impressive. And to me, the best moment is what they call Gospel Wednesday. And that's the day when in the morning they're kind of taught, what is the gospel? What does it mean to receive salvation? Have you ever done this? And they kind of fill out a little thing. And would you like to talk to somebody about that? And so then we get an opportunity, all the volunteers and the WindShape staff, to sit down with those children kind of in a hallway. We're just all sort of jammed in there together and sit down and talk with them about that. And so I'm sitting down with a little boy named Ethan. Becky's next to me with a girl over here, and she's talking about her faith. And so I had this opportunity to pray with Ethan to receive Jesus as his Savior. And it's okay, there it is. And I think there were 30-plus children that accepted Jesus during the week, and many more that were impacted for Christ and made commitments to serve him with courage. And so I am amazed, and I love it. So, all of you that prayed, or maybe you gave a scholarship, or you were there and you were serving in some capacity, thank you for that, because it is big what happens in our community, in this community right here, in the lives of children. It will affect them forever. But the theme was all, and it was based on a verse, and I've still got my armband on that has the verse on here. Mark 12:29-30, Jesus is sort of answering the Pharisees who ask him an important question: what is the most important commandment? And then Jesus responds to them and says, the most important one is this: Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. The second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. And so once again, we're reminded of all the parts to us. And when Jesus says, how do we follow God? How do we love him? With every part of our being. We hold nothing back from God. We give him our mind, our physical body. We give him our heart. We give him all of us. And so if that's how we are to love God, then that's also how we are to rest. We're to rest all the parts of us and lay all that down to him. So at the very core of who we are, how do I Sabbath? It's when I'm laying all that down to him and allowing him to do his good work in us. And I think about the word that we use sometimes to talk about taking a break or vacation or resting, recreation. You know, recreation is that thing where we go, we hike, we take a walk, we ride our bikes, we go to the beach, we throw the frisbee, whatever that is. You know, we recreate. And it comes from the 14th century French word, which is recreate. And the meaning of that word is a process of creating anew or reconstruction. I love that because when we power down and we're resting, hopefully we're also being recreated. Some of us get a little broken because of our job, maybe because of tough relationships we have or difficult circumstances in our life. And that moment when we can just stop and we invite God in, He recreates us. And He puts those pieces back together, and with His love and grace, He glues them back so that we can be whole and healthy people. And we're reconstructed once again in His image. And that's how important rest is. It's a constant process of being recreated in the image of Christ so that we're whole, healthy people. And that's important. And you know, another thing that we don't need to underestimate, and that these days experts say a lot of people do, is just the whole idea of sleeping well. You know, sleep is also something that is given to us by God. It is something that restores and heals us in ways that we probably don't even think about. I know I don't. But something happens to our brain, especially at night. And I read this, that they found that sort of during the hours of this unconscious time, the brain takes advantage of the opportunity, and it actually shrinks the synapses that connect the brain's neurons up to 20%. So if you wake up and you feel like your brain got smaller, it did. It shrunk. It was okay. It's good. And the reason is this, because it removes inconsequential information and it makes room for new memories to be made and new information to be taken in. It removes inconsequential information. Now I'm kind of thinking, golly, if it removes all the inconsequential information on my life, what else is left? Anyway, I'm sorry. But it allows more information to be put in. And this guy, Dr. Russell Foster, in a sleep research place in Oxford University, said, it is critical to have pruning back at night so that the huge amount of information encoded by temporary synapses during the day won't overwhelm the brain. And he said, pruning ensures that only the most important information is retained. And so we need that most important information, right? All that stuff that's so good that we need to hang on to. Well, it happens as a result of what goes on during that sleep time. You know, even schools are discovering this. I read that some high schools are providing space for students to take naps during the day. Where was that when I was in high school? For crying out loud. But they're creating these sort of dark places with this special thing and this hood thing that comes down, and you get like 20 minutes to power down because they're recognizing, get this, that students are more stressed out than they've ever been. And they have a lot harder time resting, and therefore they have a lot harder time focusing when they're at school, but they've discovered if they can give them a 20-minute break to sleep, that they're much better the rest of the day. I'm all for it. I'd love to do that. That'd have been so awesome. I'd have been like, don't wake me up. But they're doing that for a good reason. There's a college up in Michigan that this senior engineering student, it would be the senior engineer, right? He discovered that during finals in the library, all these people kept sleeping on their backpacks. You know, like they would put it on the table where they were studying and they would just, they would fall asleep. And he's like, golly, that looks so uncomfortable. So he's like, why don't we actually put like cots or something in the library so people could actually sleep? So he goes to the faculty and everybody, and they give him permission. And during finals, they set up cots, and they have these quiet space, and you can go sort of rent a space for 30 minutes, and you can sleep. And then you can wake up, and you're all refreshed, and you're ready to go all night long studying so that you can pass your exam. But again, they discovered, hey, that's actually a good thing. It's sort of helping that process. So, just that sleeping time is so important that we don't negate that time or compromise that. But it's all about being recreated and restored. Because generally in this world, in this day, we pretty much run everything to the margin. We run it right to the edge of the paper. And if you type up a Word document, you don't start at the very top edge and run it to the bottom, do you? And you don't run it from left edge to right edge. You have this 1-inch space all the way around, and usually you double space. By the way, there's about 93 square inches, an average 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, information you need to know. That is not inconsequential. And it's about 37% of that page that is white space. Do you know that? About a third of a page is this white space. That is intentional so that you can focus on the word so that you can read it easily and well. If you ever go to a printer, somebody who does design work for magazines, they don't bleed images all the way to the edge and type all the way to the edge. They're always creating some sort of what we call negative space on the page. Why? So that you can focus on the picture or you can focus on the type. It's just how we've been designed. Because you know what? In order to read something or look at something on a page, you need this white space, and that white space, again, is called what? Margin. It's exactly the same in our life. But the thing is, we often we don't care. We bleed it to the edge anyway. And we're so unfocused. And we have such a hard time resting because we can't see everything that's on that page well. We're overwhelmed. Man, if we could just build margin into our life and keep that white space there, you know what that is? That's where we do nothing. Ooh, what is that? That's illegal, isn't it? Doing nothing? No, that's a part of rest. And it's in that space where all kinds of good things happen. And sometimes we can't hear God because we have no margin. But if we can get that margin back in, it's amazing how much you'll hear from God. And you'll hear him speaking his word of encouragement and hope and love and joy into your life. That's the way that works. I mean, that's the way we've been designed. And so this last idea, just sort of this last question, who do we Sabbath with? If we're going to Sabbath and take this time and be recreated and rejuvenated, who am I supposed to do that with? How does that work? Well, first of all, one thing is you need to kind of know something about yourself. Are you an extrovert or an introvert? Does everybody know what those two mean? Okay, let's do a little sample. How many extroverts are in the place? How many of you out there, extroverts, raise your hand. Come on, you're an extrovert. Be proud. Okay, how many introverts? Okay, all right. It was crazy because at the first service, I couldn't find but about 5 extroverts, and everybody else was introverted. I mean, I was like, wow, that's crazy. I'm sure there's some implication to this. I don't know what it is yet, but I'll figure that out later. I'm like an extroverted introvert, and I don't know what that means, but I feel like that's what I am because I have to be extroverted, but I kind of like to be introverted. Anyway, the whole point of this is extroverts re-energize and power up by being with people. So you're an extrovert if when you're around people in a social setting a lot, you come away feeling great. You're energized, you're ready to go, you can't wait to be with people again tomorrow. And for you, it's kind of like you're solar powered. You're powered up by things outside. Introverts are like, I don't want to be with another person today, or maybe ever. Find me a book, find me a quiet space, and leave me alone. You know, you're energized more from within. You're battery powered instead of solar powered. You're powered up from within, reading, being quiet, only maybe being with a few people, you know, that you're really close to, you develop close relationships with, but you just don't get energized by you're drained by being with a lot of people. You go away going, oh my gosh, I don't ever want to go to another party or, you know, something like that, you know, office thing. And so knowing that about yourself is also helpful in terms of how you might rest and how you might power down. But either way, of course, if you're a parent, we want to recreate with our family, right? We want to give that good time to be with our families and to enjoy that time together. And you know, I look back on just my time of raising, you know, boys, and I don't regret ever one single second of spending quality time with them, either hunting or fishing or being at the farm or down at the beach or hiking in the mountains or wherever we've done. That has always put something back into me every time. And so having those relationships are vital in our life and are a part of the Sabbath process, I believe, if we have families. You know, they're a part of helping us recreate, and we certainly want to do that together. Obviously, you know, being by yourself, whether you're an extrovert or introvert, at times we just need to be alone. We need to reflect. Like we just need to power down and shut down for a while. And really, in that time, we want to be with the person that matters the most. We want to be with God. Because ultimately, there is no rest apart from Him. We will never be recreated. We will never be reconstructed into the image of Christ without God doing the work. And you have to slow down to hear Him, to sense Him, to invite Him into your life. In Psalm 62:1, it says, "Truly my soul finds rest in God. My salvation comes from Him." Important word there. Truly. The psalmist realized something very important. Nothing else in life will give rest to my soul except for God. And in Him, my salvation is found. And true rest is knowing that I am secure in Christ. No matter what happens to me in this world, I have Him. And that's all I need. And then Jesus' words, Matthew 11:28, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Not only are you wearied and burdened and beaten up by life, but maybe you're just tired of trying to do more to please God. You're trying to be more religious, hopefully trying to find that good place in His heart. And what you need to understand is there's nothing you can do to make Him love you more. He loves you. He loves you as is, but ultimately He wants a relationship with you. And He wants to give you everything you really need in life. And He wants to give you a rest that you just can't find in this world. So we want to seek that. Amen? All right, let's pray.